And I'm going to start admitting folks.
All right. Lydia, we had like 100 people sign up.
Awesome. Look at all these people.
They are coming in fast.
Hey, Ellen.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Hi.
Well, nice to see all this
There,
interest.
now I can talk to you.
Oh, where did she go? I saw Erica Oren's face.
She's there. She'll be back.
Oh, there's Susan Mead.
Yeah.
Hi. Hey, Susan. I'm trying to look around. It's hard to keep up.
We know it's a minute past, but we're going to give a little time for people to continue to gather. It's a big crew today.
Hey, Marquita.
Hey. Muted.
Hi, Jen.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this thing's working or not.
I'm going to give one more minute, folks.
Melissa? Melissa, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll take credit. Yes, dear.
It's on here.
Okay, if it's all right with everyone, let's go ahead and get started. We'll probably keep hearing the doorbell ring for a little bit, and I'll keep getting distracted and admitting people as we go, if that's all right. We actually already are recording this session. We hope that is okay with everyone who's here. If it's not, then please, you're welcome to drop the call. We wanted to record it because we had over 100 people sign up, and we thought there might even be more interest beyond the sign up that we saw. And so we'd like to make it more readily available beyond today. My name is Ellen Mayock, and I am one of the members of the 50 Ways Rockbridge Board. My co-members, whom I represent, are Ann Olson, Atim Basu-Shudari, Chris Gavaler, Jeff Swift, Theo Giraldo Prado de Luis, Louise Ward, Stephanie Wilkinson, and Tinny Sen. And before we get started, I want to do one little 50 Ways plug for next week. On Thursday next week at 5:30, 50 Ways will be running a forum that is called Considering Public Life Recruiting Diversity. And the idea is to talk with public officials, public servants who have been serving in our area for years, we used to, and understand from them what the contours of their running for office were or are, and what the contours of their job are. And the people on the panel will be Marilyn Alexander, Dennis Ayers, Aaron Britton, Tammy Dunn, and Michelle Hintz. Again, as we've been doing, please just write to 50waysrockbridge@gmail.com if you're interested in joining that forum. So I'd like to let you all know what our plan is for the next hour or so. We have three really wonderful panelists who will be addressing homelessness in the Rockbridge area. And we're going to hear from each of them in order once I introduce them. And they'll go without my intervening anymore for that. And then once they've presented their remarks, we will go to an open Q&A for everyone who's here. Some of you have already submitted questions that have been fantastic. We ask you to ask them here as well. You're welcome to put them in the chat or raise your physical hand or raise the virtual hand down below in the reactions or participants function. I have a few people here who will be helping me monitor both the chat and the hand raising, so we hope to get to as many questions as possible. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. First presenting will be Lydia Campbell, who is Community-Based Services Supervisor for the Valley Community Services Board. She's waving cheerfully over there. And she's the leader of the Valley Homelessness Connection. After Lydia, we'll hear from Judy Castile, who is Executive Director of Project Horizon, with expertise in domestic violence shelter and area homeless advocacy. And third, we'll hear from Lindsay Perez, who is Programs Manager for RARA and Homelessness Issue Representative. So we are so incredibly grateful for these three women for joining us today. I also want to give a shout out to Stephanie Wilkinson, who organized this forum, and to all of you kind people in the audience who have shown up on what will be a snowy Wednesday.
And
Thank
to
you.
Jen Handy. Got to thank Jen Handy.
Oh, and thank you. Yes, thank you, Jen Handy, who I believe with Steph cooked up this idea. So thank you very much. So Lydia, take it away, please.
All right. Thank you so much, Ellen. So my presentation is to talk about our homeless services system overall. I wanted to start with the definition of homelessness that all of the funders use, all of our state and federal funded programs. That definition is an individual who is living in a place not meant for human habitation or an emergency shelter or in a motel paid for by an agency. So probably the first thing that you guys might be thinking about, and this is typically what we, or questions that we answer, concerns that we take from community members, are what about people who are couch surfing, who are moving from place to place to place? And so unfortunately, by federal definition, the HUD definition of literally homeless, they do not meet criteria for homelessness. They are very severely unstably housed. And there are some programs that can address that. One of them that we have that could address that is our homeless prevention program. So someone who is staying with friends or family and changing location every couple of days, and where they're staying with someone and it's the landlord has said, you can't stay here anymore, or both of you are going to lose your apartment, and we can verify that but for this assistance, that individual would end up entering the homeless services system. We can assist with that, with helping them secure permanent housing. Another definition that's really important to know is the definition of chronic homelessness. Now, Lindsay and Judy, sometimes I get the numbers wrong. So if you get an opportunity to jump in, if I haven't said it correctly, please let me know. It also has changed over the years. There are two elements to be met with chronic homelessness. The first is whether or not someone has a diagnosed disability. That is the very first piece that has to be met. The second piece is the length of time that someone has been experiencing literal homelessness. So using the definition that I previously provided, the length of time is going to be 4 or more episodes that add up to a total of 12 months over the last 3 years, or 12 months consecutively. So as you can see, defining someone or assuring that someone meets the definition of chronic homelessness can be kind of tricky. Although there are lots of us who have been equally tricky in figuring out how to calculate that length of time. That definition is important because there are a number of acronyms that we use. And so I will do my very best not to use the acronyms or to say what it is and then define it, use the whole word. So one of our favorite acronyms is PSH, and that is Permanent Supportive Housing. And the permanent supportive housing is an entire model of housing where someone, thanks Jen, where an individual is experiencing literal homelessness and may also be interested in and would very likely benefit from ongoing supportive services. Those supportive services can be a number of things. It can be mental health case management. It could be housing focused case management. It could be whatever that individual needs to be able to be successful in independent permanent housing. The reason that the definition of chronic homelessness is important with regards to permanent supportive housing is there's a priority placed on individuals who are experiencing chronic homelessness by that definition for those slots in permanent supportive housing. One of the things that Ellen said during her introduction was that I was the chair of the Valley Homeless Connection. And the thought occurred to me that maybe we should talk about what that actually is. The Valley Homeless Connection is a local planning group that is a subgroup, a participant in the Balance of State Continuum of Care. If you ever get the chance or have a rabbit hole that you would like to go down on the internet, search Continuum of Care. Basically, that is the way that HUD has divided areas, geographic areas or agencies to fund homeless services. Started in the mid 90s, I believe, and I believe that the Valley partnership started in 1999. Is that right, Judy? Do you remember? It was, I think.
I wasn't here then, but I think it is
Okay.
about the same time.
Okay. I think one of the original documents that I saw said 1999. And over the years, our area went, thanks, Lindsay, our area went from being its own continuum of care to being part of the state continuum of care. The Balance of State Continuum of Care is managed by DHCD, which is Department of Housing and Community Development, it's a state department. And they manage the local planning groups who are in rural areas, and we're all kind of spread out. So we're in a unique position. Our local planning group, Valley Homeless Connection, covers the following areas: Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro, Highland County, Rockbridge, Lexington, Buena Vista, and Bath. Pretty large area. The funds that we receive for programming from the Department of Housing and Community Development for the homeless prevention program that I mentioned, or through HUD, which Lindsay, I think, put in Housing and Urban Development for permanent supportive housing. They are administered by one agency, by Valley Community Services Board in Stanton, but everybody in the local planning group are eligible to receive those services and participate in those programs. That is why it is beneficial to be part of a continuum of care or to be part of a local planning group, because the funds are for the entire coverage area. Super helpful. We talked about prevention, homeless prevention, and what that program is a little bit. We talked a little bit about what permanent supportive housing is. We have an additional permanent housing program called Rapid Rehousing. That is also a state and federally funded program. And the entrance requirements, the eligibility requirements are very similar to permanent supportive housing, except permanent supportive housing, the idea is that that individual would need to receive longer term assistance, ongoing rental assistance, ongoing supportive services. Kind of similar to Section 8, although it's not called that anymore. It's called Housing Choice Voucher now, but Section 8 is ongoing rental assistance, and permanent supportive housing takes it a step further and provides other services to help people maintain their success in their housing. Rapid rehousing is short-term. It is designed for someone who is experiencing literal homeless and just needs a little bit of a push, a little bit of support, a little bit of a bump to get over this current situation and secure permanent housing, and go on and back to work and do the things that they need to do. Typically, it's about 3 months of assistance offered at a time. And every 3 months, someone has to continue to show need for that assistance. In rapid rehousing, we can house a lot of people quickly, but it's very dependent on units available, the apartments that landlords have and are willing to give folks a second chance. A lot of the individuals that we're working with, you'll find, have poor credit histories. If it were easy for them to secure an apartment on their own, they wouldn't need our services. So something that the Valley Homeless Connection does annually is a point in time count. And that point in time count is required by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And it is a prescribed time period once a year. Virginia does it all on the same night. Doesn't matter what locality you're in. If you're in the state of Virginia, the point in time count all happens the same time. And our point in time count was the night of January 27th. And some of the things that we've heard over the years across the nation at various different trainings, why do we pick a point in time count in the winter? There's no answer for that. There has not ever been an answer for that. What it has required is folks, volunteers, or outreach worker going out into the community and locating individuals who might be in an unsheltered situation. Folks who are residing in shelter are also counted. And there's various pieces of information that we're looking for, like an answer to what has led you to homelessness right now. So looking at, is it disability? Is it loss of employment? You know, what other sorts of services do we need to focus on in our community to keep this from happening? We do not have the results from our point in time count yet. We probably won't have those for another month or two, because our information, because we're a local planning group, goes to the state and they compile it and then send us the numbers. What I do know preliminarily is that locating that night folks who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. We located 6 individuals and only 3 of them were unknown to our system. That is incredible because last year 17 folks were located and all 17 were unknown to our system. Now, what it means to be known to our system is that we, I think we started this in 2018, but it might have been 2019 at the beginning. We started what we call a by name list. And it's literally just a list of names of people that everyone in our Valley Homeless Connection have worked with or are aware of that are experiencing literal homelessness. We know that one agency cannot end homelessness on its own. That's why we have a whole group of folks who are interested in ending homelessness. And twice a month, representatives from these agencies get together and meet in what's called case conferencing. And case conferencing is taking a look at that by name list, which is prioritized or organized by folks who are experiencing chronic homelessness by that definition that I gave a little bit ago, and veterans who are experiencing homelessness. Those are the 2 subpopulations that our group has chosen to focus on ending homelessness for first. Regardless of whether or not an individual meets the definition of chronic or meets criteria to be considered a veteran, they make it onto that by name list and we track them. And regardless of whether or not they might be chronic, they are still afforded this, or veteran, they're still afforded the same opportunity to participate in rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing or just case management to help them get to permanent housing. That's the end goal, is permanent housing. The purpose of case conferencing is to have a team approach and to figure out which agency is going to take which piece of moving this individual to permanent housing. We are finding it to be absolutely the most effective thing that we've ever done to be able to secure permanent housing. It's pretty cool. It also has strengthened our collaboration and coordination among agencies. We are no longer operating in silos. I don't know that I can put it into words about how well it is working. And where we were a couple of years ago compared to how we are as a system working now is just absolutely incredible. And what that means is that more individuals are in safe, stable, and permanent housing now than have been in our community before. I think that might be all that I have to say. I think, Judy, that you should take it over.
Thanks, Lydia. There are a couple questions in chat. Do you want to look at those before I start? Or do you want to get back to them?
It is up to y'all. The question looks like, okay, so the question that we're looking at, I think that you're talking about is just defined the same for children as for adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Department of Education has an entirely different definition. And so school systems have homeless family liaisons, I think is what they're called. And in the programs that are funded, yes, the definition for is different between federal agencies. The programs that we have currently funded are focused on adults who are homeless. However, we do have an application out to focus on youth homeless. But youth homeless as in the housing world is different than what you would define youth as. Youth in the housing world is 18 to 24. However, the definitions that went along with that grant application are much more relaxed than they have been for other grant applications, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that answered the question. Yes, it's different, but it does not apply to the work that we're doing at this moment in time.
I think we can
Okay,
go
so-
on to Judy
okay.
and come back, circle back to some of these questions. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Well, first of all, as I talk about what homeless looks, Lindsay and I will talk about what homelessness looks like in our community, but I can't even start without saying how much we owe to Lydia for her leadership. We wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for her and what she's done. If the information you heard seems overwhelming, yes, it's a lot. It's a lot of information, but so much of what she talked about had to do with our funding and how the feds identify how we can use that funding and who's eligible for funding. We can't do this without money. And so that's a really important place to start. But in the Rockbridge community, Project Horizon, I see so many people on the call that are Project Horizon board members or former staff members or current supporters. You know about Project Horizon. One of the things that we do, part of our mission, is to be a sanctuary for victims. And so to help you understand our role in addressing homelessness, you need to know that we respond to requests for shelter through our crisis hotline, which is available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We operate the only shelter in the Rockbridge community. Now, our shelter is called Lisa's House, and many times we get people who are confused about Lisa's House and Project Horizon. They'll even call us and say, have you heard of Lisa's House? Lisa's House is not a separate entity. It's a program of Project Horizon. Most people think it's the biggest part of what we do. It's actually the smallest part of what we do, but it takes incredible resources. It's a shelter for victims of domestic violence. But another way to think about that is in terms of homelessness, is that we provide shelter for people who are homeless due to domestic violence. And we go back to the federal regulations, that's one of the definitions they use is that people who are homeless due to domestic violence. There's multiple studies that show us that there's definitely a connection between domestic violence and homelessness. And in some communities, they say that accounts for most of their homelessness. It's complicated. When victims leave a domestic violence situation, not only are they forced to leave their homes with nowhere to turn, but oftentimes there's nowhere to go. In our community, fortunately, we do have Project Horizon and Lisa's House, but you will find domestic violence victims living in their cars or in hotels or doubled up with family or friends, not knowing where to go. And again, as much as we're out in the community, it's always surprising to us when folks say, I never knew you existed. And like I said, it gets more complicated. People fleeing domestic violence are more likely to have a problem finding housing because of the circumstances that Lydia mentioned, such as poor credit, rental employment histories, or even limited income. One of the problems we see, and even though it's against the law, we've seen landlords, honestly, just recently, turn away victims of domestic violence out of their homes because of the violence they've endured. Violence and homelessness are multi-generational, which I'm sure doesn't surprise you. It does affect children. What we know from research is that by age 12, 83% of homeless children have been exposed to at least one serious violent event, and nearly 25% of those have witnessed violence in their own homes. As Lydia said, we have a connection between homelessness programs and domestic violence programs in our area, but there's some challenges. And part of those challenges have to do with the differences in our mission and our philosophy. So just a little background on that. Domestic violence programs work through what we call a trauma-informed approach or a trauma-informed lens. So that means that we value the strength-based services. And so our overall framework for working with victims is based on an understanding of and a responsiveness to the impact of trauma. So we place an emphasis on physical and emotional safety and give victims opportunities to rebuild a sense of power and gain back their own control. Now, I don't mean this to imply that programs addressing homelessness aren't trauma informed. Many are, but it's simply to point out the differences in how we do our work. And it does make a difference. For programs addressing homelessness, typically what's used is called a housing first model. And that means let's get folks in housing first, and then the other steps follow. Although it's not an official term, our model in domestic violence programs can really best be summed up as safety first, and then housing. Because as I said before, survivors fleeing domestic violence have to cope with homelessness, poverty, social isolation, on top of their fear for safety and the safety of their children. Another concern that we deal with all of the time is confidentiality. It's a major concern, as you can imagine, for victims of domestic violence. What we know is that victims are at greater risk of homicide by the hands of their abusers at the point when they leave. So while some people might think that the shelter is a respite from danger, statistically, it's when victims are most likely to be killed. You heard Lydia mention the Homeless Management Information System, which we lovingly call HIMIS, and the by name list, where we actually use people's names. The purpose of these systems is to provide an unduplicated count of people who are homeless, and also to understand how they use shelters, determine the effectiveness of the stabilization and housing strategies. So what I can tell you in Rockbridge is that we have an incomplete picture of homeless in our community. And that's partially because Project Horizon does not and cannot participate in either of these systems. It really is sort of one of those, I think, worst of government situations. If we participate in the Homeless Management Information System or the by name list, it could place domestic violence victims in more danger. So instead of using HIMIS, we have to enter the information through an encoded, encrypted system. It is every bit as complicated as it sounds. What happens is the Department of Housing says, in order for us to be eligible for funding, we have to participate in HIMIS. The Violence Against Women Act, which is a federal law, says that programs like Project Horizon are prohibited from participating in HIMIS. So one part of the government says you have to do it, the other part says you can't do it, and the compromise becomes this cumbersome encrypted system that we have to use in order to put our people into the system. But I do want you to know that we do keep track of statistical and demographic information. We're just not putting names out there. Some of you asked about numbers earlier. So to give you an idea of the number of people we serve, in 2019, Project Horizon provided shelter for 71 people for over 2,000 nights. Now, out of those 71 people, 3% were homeless for reasons other than domestic violence. So in 2019, 97% of the people we served were homeless due to domestic violence. We all know 2020 was a completely different year than we've ever experienced. In 2020, our shelter stays increased by 59%. We sheltered 113 people for over 3,000 nights. And while in 2019, 3% of those were homeless for reasons other than domestic violence, in 2020, that number jumped to 16%. We're only 6 weeks into 2021, but I'm already scared. In just 6 weeks, we've sheltered 23 people. 9% of those are homeless due to reasons other than domestic violence. If that trend were to continue, and we can't expect it to continue every 6 weeks, I hope not for 2021, but if it does, we will shelter more than 200 people for over 5,000 nights. Our part in that is we have some funding that helps us use local hotels to provide temporary housing for people who are homeless. There are a number of problems with that, but one of the problems is it simply is not our area of expertise, nor do we have the staffing and the resources to manage that. We have one person who works with folks who are in hotels, but primarily we're working with domestic violence victims. Because of COVID-19 restrictions, our overflow of people have to go into local hotels. Single women and families can no longer share rooms in our shelter. So we have to put people in local hotels. Much of our increase in requests for services is due to the global pandemic, but the after effects of unemployment, poverty, lack of affordable housing, and violence in the home, those are not going to magically go away once all of our vaccines are done and once we're all doing better. It's not going to happen. So we have to figure out how are we as a community going to address the problem. We're ready to help, but I'll tell you, we're stretched to the limit with our available resources, and we have to stay true to our mission and our expertise. So I will turn it over. Oh, I see a question. Does it mean you house 71 people for 2,000 nights each? No, that is a total of nights for the year was over 2,000. 2,246 nights in 2019. In 2020, that was 3,076 nights.
Thank you, Judy. So I think when a lot of people think about rah-rah, they think about our food pantry. And I know a lot of the people on this call are very informed about what we do, but just in case not everyone is familiar with it, in addition to the food pantry, we also have our helpline. The helpline assists with rent, utilities, and emergency shelter needs for people in Rockbridge County. So we take applications by phone Monday through Thursday from 9:30 a.m. to 12 noon. And then in the afternoons, we process applications. When people call our helpline, we collect basic demographics and information about their current situation to get a better sense of what is going on and whether we can assist. So in the instance of people experiencing homelessness, they can call RARA first. People have asked, who do I call first? If it's not related to domestic violence and they're in Rockbridge County, I would say call RARA during those business hours. And then we provide other referrals. So we can get people connected through the Valley Homeless Connection, Project Horizon if needed. But the good thing about all of us working together is that no matter who they call, they're still in that same system and they're all going to be connected. When we do get calls, we try to prioritize emergency housing situations as they arise, but it's not right at that moment that we're on the phone with them that we're going to be able to help. There's a process. So we need to decide what the best options are. If it's putting someone up in a motel for a couple nights, we need to reach out to the motels that we work with to get them a stay. We send them vouchers. If it's going to a shelter, we will connect with that shelter and get them on the list and then provide transportation. So then that's another phone call. We call RATS to get them to either Stanton, Waynesboro, Roanoke. And then maybe we'll talk to case managers if the person calling is working with another agency. So there are a lot of calls back and forth before we can actually assist someone, but we try to do it as quickly as possible. One thing at RARA, so Judy talked a lot about, or not, sorry, Lydia mentioned the funding that's coming from DHCD. So RARA does not get funding from DHCD. We use our own internal funding for people that are experiencing homelessness, but our focus is on keeping people in their homes. It's either keeping them in their homes or getting them quickly rehoused. The reason for this is because we would rather spend funds on long-term housing than short-term expensive motel stays. During pre-COVID times, our hotel vouchers were very minimal. Our preference was to quickly get people to either a shelter or permanent housing. We would use motel vouchers in very extreme cases. Like if we couldn't get them up to the shelter in time, maybe the transportation wasn't available until the next day. And we would only provide them for 1 to 2 days at a time. Since COVID, we have increased our vouchers up to 7 days. This was due to temporary closures of shelters and just the inability to get them that immediate housing at the time. And so last year we provided 67 hotel stays in 2020. I don't have 2019 available, but it was probably, I don't know, my guess would be about 10. We did a lot more in 2020 for a lot longer too. The reason, aside from wanting to focus on permanent solutions, that we also like getting people to shelters is that they can provide more resources in a controlled environment. So people have access to case management. They have access to the other funding that Lydia talked about. And at RARA, we are not case managers. It's more of a hotline where we go through the information with the clients and we set them up with the best resources and provide that short-term assistance, but we don't follow up with the clients as much as a case manager would. So you could think of us as a tool for resources in Rockbridge County. Once people are on the by name list, we like to partner with other agencies. So either like Project Horizon frequently or the Valley Homeless Connection. We might partner on first month's rent or security deposit or even utilities. And that way the funding goes a little bit farther. Another question that we frequently get is, so at RARA, our value is treating everyone with dignity and respect. That's one of our core beliefs. People often call us and say, I see this person that's homeless and they say that you're not helping, or can you help even? Because we treat everyone with dignity and respect, confidentiality, like Judy talked about, is very important to us. So when we get those calls, we cannot share the details of whether we helped or why we did not help without the client's permission. We really appreciate people reaching out to us, and we have great advocates in the community. Like everyone really steps up to help people out. But we would need to talk to the client directly whenever possible to get the information directly from them. I will tell you though, there are some reasons that we might not provide help. If there has been damage to hotels in the past, when we've put someone up, we're not going to do it again because we have a limited number of hotels that we can work with, and we need to keep that relationship good to be able to put other people in the hotel. Or if we've reached the maximum number of days that we can provide, then we can't help again at that time. But in those cases, we don't just say, that's it, like you're on your own. We try to get creative. We offer transportation into a shelter or first month's rent or security deposit. We've even, for instance, there was someone that contacted us whose car was an impound in Roanoke. We tried to find a way to get it out of impound. Like, we will work with that person to find other options and address their needs. But we cannot make them take those options. It is their decision. So that's part of treating them with dignity, is letting them decide what they want to do. And so sometimes when you maybe like see people that appear to be experiencing homelessness, it could be that they've received those options and they've just decided that at that point they're not ready to take them. So as I said, our community is very good about coming together to help people out. We just recommend that you loop us in if you do come across someone that needs our services, because we might be able to provide additional support. Lastly, I will talk about our emergency vouchers. So the question is, what do you do outside of RAH's hours? We have emergency vouchers that the police departments and a couple churches in the area are able to utilize to assist people outside of our hours. They have authorization to use a voucher for 1 to 2 nights. And typically the police departments only use it for people temporarily passing through town, sometimes known as transient, that may be stuck in Lexington or just need something really quickly that night. For longer term ones, or people that are, experiencing homelessness for a longer amount of time, it would be calling us during the day, and then we can work with them to try to find something more permanent. So yeah, that is a little bit about RAHA.
Thank you so much to Lydia, to Judy, and to Lindsay. Big round of applause. And now I see many, many questions in the chat, and maybe we can start with those. And people should also feel very welcome to raise their actual hands or the virtual hand. It looks to me like we had a question way back from Tuck about veterans and homelessness in Virginia. Tuck, help me out. There it is.
I believe I had run across something that said that Central Virginia had ended veterans homelessness. I don't know what the status of veterans homelessness is in Virginia or more narrowly in Rockbridge County.
So this is Lydia. I will take that question. Is that cool? So, and I got really excited because this is something that you all should know. The state of Virginia did announce that they ended veteran homeless in Virginia. But here's what that actually means. Anytime you hear someone say that they ended homelessness, it means that they have reached functional zero. Sorry, y'all. That's a beagle.
Every housing people within 90 days, is that
30.
Is that what they're doing? 30.
So it's that when someone enters the homeless services system, that you have capacity to move more into permanent housing than you do coming into the system. So if 3 individuals enter homelessness on February 1st, and you can then, and your system can house 4 by February 28th, you're at functional zero.
Gotcha.
I don't agree with the criteria, but it's where we are.
I think those are reasonable criteria. But anyway.
Thank you for that.
It looks like, I think Bridget had a good series of questions, and I think Rudy doggedly responded to those. Bridget, let us know, I can't see you, but let us know if there's something that hasn't been answered. Are you there? Bridget, there you are. You're on mute, Bridget.
I'm not as experienced as you at Zooming. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. Do you have
Okay.
any questions remaining that Judy has answered in the chat?
I have to look. Hold on. Let's see.
Okay, sure. And I think,
I mean, there's so much good information that's been provided, and I really appreciate it. And I just feel terrible that I've not been engaged in this problem. It only really came up for me because I ran into someone on the street and I was trying to help them. And it was really difficult to do it. The number that I got I wasn't able to really get through. I really felt like I had to put this person in a hotel myself. I believe I had a Aurora number. I tried to call Stanton. I couldn't get through there. I was just Googling numbers because I really didn't know what to do. And so some of my questions, a lot of my questions relate to that kind of thing. If you run into someone and it's going to be, single digit wind chill that night, and they're not going to do well, how do you help them? So, and then I had the question of, like, even after I got them in a hotel, it seemed to take a while for me I don't even really know, because I lost contact with him because of the confidentiality issue, I totally understand that. And I have no problem with that, but I don't know how long it takes to get them into some kind of a shelter. Is there some kind of time frame that it generally takes?
I can answer part of that question.
How long do they stay in it? And I have a lot of questions. Sorry.
thanks, Bridget.
I can answer part of that, and then maybe Lydia could answer about how long it takes to get into the shelter. But so if you come across someone who appears to be homeless, first of all, I would say make sure that they want assistance. This probably goes without saying, but don't just, like, if you see someone on the street that looks homeless, say, okay, I need to get that person help. Make sure that they are okay with it and that they understand that you're interested in getting connecting them with some resources.
Well, in my case, he definitely was.
Right. Yes, exactly. And yes, I'm familiar with that case too. So if it's outside of our hours and it's cold and they're not able to get to the warm shelter, which in most years functions where you can call in, get a bed. Right now it's a little bit different due to COVID. Then you would call law enforcement to get them into a voucher if it's too cold for them to stay outside. I know it's not the ideal situation, but it is what's going to get them warm for the night. And then the next day we can work on something more long-term.
What law enforcement agencies have the vouchers?
So all of them, I believe. Jen can correct me, but so Lexington PD is very familiar with it, the county as well. So they all have them. They might not be as familiar with them if they don't use them as often, though.
Buena Vista?
Yes.
Thank you. I think Molly had a question in the chat. It says, is Rara making progress on finding a place to relocate?
We're working on that. Yes. That's for a different call, but yes.
Okay, let's see if there are other questions that aren't in the chat. Anybody? I see Tuck's hand. Go ahead, Tuck.
Yeah, I just had a question about the point in time count over the last 3 years. Just what is it locally?
Short of Project Horizon or RAW collecting their own data, like retaining their own data, it is not separated between Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro, and Rockbridge County. So I can give you that data, not today. I've got to pull it from the depths of my computer. I'll get it to you, but it's going to be for the entire Valley Homeless Connection.
That's fine.
Jen, go ahead.
So Tug, I can tell you, our point in times for Rockbridge County have not been overly successful to find homeless individuals on a single night, which is one of the reasons we were very happy to move to a by name list. So as we were encountering people, we felt like we were encountering homeless people throughout the year, but maybe one or two people on that very specific night. So the point in time count has never been super helpful for Rockbridge County. So we do it, but it's not a really good metric for us, if that makes sense.
Jen, is there a chronic homelessness number for our area?
I'll have to look into see the by name list, how many fall in there that we know of. It's just, it's an unusual county. It's not like there's a single place. Rockbridge County has got all of its nooks and crannies. I can look into that for you, Tuck, and get back to you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of the scope of the current problem that we're all trying to address.
Mhm.
I believe Valerie has a question, but Judy, did you want to say something first?
Yeah, on the same Project Horizon does participate in point in time count. So on that night, everyone's in our shelter, everyone who are housing in hotels is counted in those numbers.
There's some weird feedback on what you're saying, Judy. I don't know if people were able to get it. And you want to try again?
Sure. I don't know what the problem is. Still the same?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. If Lydia or Lindsay or Jen do good homelessness interpreting from what Judy just said, please feel free to weigh in. So I think Valerie had a question, and then I saw a really good question from Fran in the chat. So let's go to Valerie.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could comment on the COVID relief state funds that were for rent and mortgage assistance to help prevent homelessness, whether we've been able to effectively use them in our community, and is there any left?
I will take that question because I am who administered that program. We had the program from June 29th to December 31st. And then the Department of Housing and Community Development decided not to renew the contracts with any local agencies across the state, and it is administering it in-house. I would have to pull data at some point, but Rockbridge did an excellent job. These guys did an excellent job of rerouting all of the Rockbridge requests to the Valley Housing Crisis Line, and we assisted a ton of people in our entire local planning group to the tune of $650,000 between July and December. It was an extremely successful program, and in my opinion, and that program was more difficult for me as a social worker to administer than any of the homeless programs, because that I have ever administered, and I have been in the housing sort of field since 2006. The people who were calling for assistance for that program, the fear and the in their stories, it was just lots of single moms, lots of two-parent families who now no longer had jobs and were scared to death, lots of tears. That program is still available, and the way that folks can access it is through calling the State Support Center. That phone number is 703-962-1884. And Thanks, y'all. And then there is also an online application process, and that web address is https://applications.deval, DEVAL.us. They are still making payments. We do know that the mortgage portion of that program, those funds are exhausted, but the rent portion continues. And for those who have mortgages, the hope is that their lenders are able to continue to extend the forbearance periods for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is Fran's from the chat. Fran, do you want to ask it?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for these presentations. They're super, 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 and for the work that you all do and the services you provide to our community. My question is, it's that kind of a magic wand question. Like, if you had a magic wand, or what are the gaps that you wish could be filled in terms of better serving both our homeless population, and I know this is about homelessness, but I'd also just like to throw in there the question about insecurely housed people, which I think is, I'm curious about it. How do we do that? How do we do that here? If anyone can respond to that.
Sure. So if I had a magic wand, my wish would be for a mental health crisis response team, like outside of law enforcement, and ongoing case management related to that. So sometimes when people call us who are experiencing homelessness, whether residents of Rockbridge County or just passing through, we need to assess whether it's safe to put them in a hotel. Through talking to them, it becomes evident that they're experiencing some paranoia or delusions or other mental health issues. And it doesn't necessarily warrant calling law enforcement. And so it would be helpful to have a team to quickly respond to those situations and determine whether it is safe, and then providing ongoing case management related to that and any related issues with substance misuse.
Are there good models out there that you know of?
Austin, Texas. So
okay,
having
that does not surprise me.
Yes.
Fairfax County.
Mm,
Fairfax County has a great model. But also doing more comprehensive mental health first aid training, you know, for just us, for all of us, could be very helpful, I think.
Thanks for
so
that
that's my
great
wish.
question, Fran. And I just wanted to make sure that we saw what Judy put in the chat, which is similar to Lindsay's reply, that certainly ongoing case management is on the wish list and an actual shelter. Let's see, looks like, Jen, thank you for responding to Lori's question, which is in the chat. Let me see, are there any other hands? Anybody else in the audience want to ask a question? We have time for maybe 2 more questions. If anyone sees a hand I don't, please let me know.
I think Pat Jones is raising her hand.
Great. You've got the floor, Pat. Pat, you're on mute. There you go.
I put a question in chat. I was curious as to what you see as the 3 biggest barriers to finding housing for homeless in our area. Talking about permanent housing for people that are chronically homeless.
Okay, if I heard that correctly, because there's some delay, sounds like what are the 3 biggest barriers to finding housing for homeless individuals in our area? So that can be
Nobody wants to answer that one.
One is landlords who will rent to them.
Yes, that is correct. And I was going to say, I don't think that these would be barriers that are specific necessarily to Rockbridge, but to housing, finding permanent housing for people who are homeless in general, our landlords who are willing to rent to them.
Correct.
The other
So
one,
having,
no, go ahead, Lindsay.
yeah, I was just gonna say, having criminal backgrounds, especially recent ones or recent evictions too, which is part of the reason we want to prevent those evictions.
One of the others, thank you, Gloria, I see that. One of the other issues is that all of the funding that we have to assist people in securing permanent housing is limited on what we can pay per month. And so the rents and utilities need to be at a certain limit in order for us to pay. And there's no regulation on what private landlords can charge.
Any other replies to that before we?
Yeah, single room occupancy units is maybe a subset of that, just having sufficient number of them in the community.
HUD doesn't fund SROs too often anymore. They don't do new projects for SROs. They do renewal projects, but getting new projects for SROs or transitional housing is extremely difficult. And the funding grant applications, I mean, it's
But it would definitely be a bottleneck.
For sure, yeah. For sure. The focus on securing apartments is the idea that it could be a one and done. They could live there forever with the right supports.
Yeah, especially if they're zoned right and they're small enough and affordable enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Bridget.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, I asked a question about, do the churches have phone numbers where we could call if we needed vouchers? And also, will this session be recorded and shared later?
Grace has a phone number.
Can you share it?
I don't know it.
Okay, well,
but it's definitely online.
I know it. It's 540-463-4981.
Yeah, I just
4981.
Jen has her hand up.
Yeah. So the churches and law enforcement have vouchers that we then pay for, but it's meant to be used when we are not open. So someone should not call Grace Episcopal Church at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. And if they do, they should send them to us.
Well, if anyone calls Grace Episcopal Church, we will send them to RARA.
Yeah, so it's really meant as an after hours. So if someone walked in on a Sunday and the church was open, they could use that. But yeah, I wanted to make sure whenever is open, we are funneling through us the vouchers. It's meant to be, we are not a 24-hour hotline that does those sorts of things. So
got it.
Yeah.
There's one question that Judy has responded to in the chat. It's from Cindy Mullen. If funds were available to have a homeless shelter, which local agency would want to be the administrator of it? It's a good question.
Jen, do you want to take that?
Sorry, extra panelist. So people ask about this all the time, and while it is good, I just want to reiterate how much expertise and knowledge and energy needs to come with that. It is not necessarily RARA's mission to operate a homeless shelter. We aren't case managers, we aren't mental health professionals, those sorts of things. I don't really know who would operate it, but I would feel strongly that whoever did would need to have the resources and the commitment to keep people safe emotionally, physically. Like it's much more than opening up space and hoping everyone's safe. And I think thinking that through and thinking if that's a commitment the community is really willing to make, it both resources and time, expertise, is just not to take it lightly. So that's my soapbox that Lindsay knows I have.
So in our last,
and it also doesn't diminish Judy's desire for one. We want one that is done well.
In our last few minutes, I might just ask, is there anything that's come up that any one of the three panelists would like to circle back to provide more information or close a gap or? Steph.
I just wanted to ask, Jen and I had talked a little bit about expanding the topic of tonight's talks about substandard housing as well as, homelessness. And she said, well, that's a whole other ball of wax. So I would be curious to know by show of hands, how many people would be interested in attending another forum that had to do with how our community is handling substandard housing. Anybody?
Hold on.
Okay,
Minute.
great, awesome.
Pretty convincing. Okay, that's nice.
Jen had both hands up, just for the record.
She cheats a lot.
Any last question before we wrap up? Okay. Well, I want to reiterate 50 Ways Rockbridge. Great thanks to Lydia, to Lindsay, and to Judy. Thank you so much for sharing your extreme expertise. To Jen Handy for handing us the idea for this forum and also weighing in. And to Stephanie for doing so much of the legwork to make this happen. So thanks to everybody, and thanks so much to so many people for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. Maybe we'll see you next Tuesday night, which is the Queer Theology Forum. Wednesday night is Educators of Color, and Thursday night is Considering Public Life Recruiting Diversity. So check us out on the web. Thanks.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody. Thanks again.
And thank you, Ellen.
Yes, thank you, Ellen.
Of course.
Great moderation. Thank you.
It's the only thing I do in moderation.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks so much. So much information. That was great.
I've never enjoyed annotating a conversation more with links. Like I want to do all conversations with like people giving links as I speak.
That was actually so helpful because
It's really fun. It's like, ooh, you need an acronym. Here's a link.
Yes, thank you.
So,
but and you can say we've recorded it, and I'll save the chat, and that way all that information as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good to see you, Tamara.
Ellie, you were great.
Oh, thanks.
Fantastic.
Thanks for helping me see the hands.
Oh, no, that's nothing. Thank you. See you later.
All right, see ya. I'm gonna end. Bye. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.